I had a $373,000 check. And I was like, here's where the last few years of my life have been. And that just was the mindset shift that just shot me off like a rocket.
You have an entrepreneurial gene in you. Like, you were always exploring. Instead of just like going straight into trades, you wanted to run a business.
And that is a blessing and a curse because it's hard to stay present a lot of time in the moment. So in the next 3 years, we want to go from a $5 million to a $50 million portfolio.
Welcome back to the Hybrid Real Estate Professional Podcast, the show where we break down how high performers are building real estate portfolios without burning out or blowing up their lives. I'm your host, Aaron Amin, a full-time consultant, father of three, a real estate investor balancing ambition with real life. Today's guest is my friend Hunter Frusha, a general contractor turned real estate investor who now manages over $5 million in assets, including 30 plus single-family rentals, a multifamily property, and self-storage deals across Louisiana and Texas. He's scaled fast using creative financing, smart partnerships, and the kind of systems that actually buy back your time. If you've been wondering how to grow your portfolio without losing your mind, this one's for you. So let's jump in. Hunter, how you doing, man? Great to have you.
Good, man. Yeah, really excited. Fresh into a new move into Austin, Texas. Just watched that Texas sunset, which I know you're really familiar with.
Yeah, no kidding, man. I saw you at the time of this recording. I saw you about 4 or 5 days ago, and you had just literally like 2 days before that moved to Austin. So I'm happy to catch you on the cusp of this big change. I want to hear all about it. But before we get to today, let's start a bit in the past and kind of talk about how you got your start, in as a contractor.
So I got my start like most people, broke college student looking for a job. I was working at Sears, which I think went bankrupt at this point. So I was a back-end loader making minimum wage and had to find something more to afford to pay the bills and stuff. So started looking and got an internship at an insurance company. I was going to school for business management. So I was like, yeah, let's take this internship, go in for an interview, see what they're willing to pay, what they're willing to offer. So I go to the interview and it's an old 70-plus-year-old man that owns a Progressive insurance branch. And he said, this is an internship. That means I'm not paid. And I was like, oh shit, this isn't going to work for me. I need to get paid. I need money, things like that. He was like, this is like a credit towards your degree. And I was like, well, do you have anything else? He was like, actually, I own some rental property. And I was like, okay, I didn't know anything about rental property. I'm 18, 19, maybe years old at the time. So I was just willing to take anything outside of Sears and corporate world. So I jumped in at the opportunity. He had about 40 doors at the time, and he was still surprisingly aggressively buying stuff at that age just because he loved it, kept him busy. Just your typical older guy that didn't want to hang it up, enjoyed it, things like that, the day-to-day still. So took the job with him, $8 an hour, and it was a mess. Everything from his systems, he was still physically collecting rent. He was letting people get 6+ months delinquent. All the properties were just super crappy. Maintenance guys doing tradesman work. So you could imagine how that was. Typical slumlord in the nicest way. And I'm going to send him this video once we're done recording. So we still laugh and we're still really close to this day. But started out working with him and that lasted about 2.5, 3 years. The most I ever made was $12 an hour. So quite the jump from where we are now. And over the years, me and him acquired about 5 or 6 rental properties, did a few flips, things like that, but really cleaned up his systems. And more than anything, what he taught me was not what not to do more than what to do. So I knew if I ever wanted to get into real estate, that it would be a completely different approach. I respected his conservativeness and things like that when it come to only buying good deals. But majority of everything else, the way he handled repairs, the way he managed people and subcontractors, the way he managed his properties and didn't really filter out applicants so would get bad tenants, things like that. Almost everything else was a complete 360 from the way he done it. And like most typical old stubborn guys, he didn't like a young guy telling him how to do things until I improved efficiencies and helped out there. So it all started back then as handyman style work, and then a little bit of property management. And then I got to the point where I was ready to graduate school and I was like, oh shit, I'm about to graduate. Times flew. I've enjoyed this. So what do I do now? Do I go into insurance? Do I go into just business management, of whether it's day trading or a bunch of different job opportunities I had there and to move out of state, but found a home in real estate and really enjoyed contracting. So started a small construction company, me and a neighbor of mine. You could respect this as a big musician. He was like a rocker, punk rocker. He's a cool guy. He's in his 50s and he was a truck driver. And I talked to him and he said, yeah, my dad was a home builder and me and him would do little projects on the side and stuff. So we formed a good relationship because I needed more money than the $8 to $12 an hour I was making with the old man. So we would go do side jobs when he wasn't doing cross country trucking. And then it got to the point where I was like, okay, I want to start to make more and like build a business. So we had those discussions and eventually left the older guy and still help him to this day with things because he still doesn't know how to list a property on Zillow for rent. So, and I've created SOPs and they're just over his head. So started that small construction company there where we primarily focused on failed inspections. So it's kind of a niche of, you know how it goes, a failed inspection, you can't close a deal. So we would go in and we were honey-do listers. We could do a little bit of everything. We'd kind of come in, save the day. And what was so cool about that niche was we would get paid a lot of times out of closing. So we would be able to charge a little more for like your high demand and like needing to get the job done quick, save the deal type of situation. We did that for a while, a couple of months, and then started to build a reputation with realtors. Once we built that reputation, we started to get some remodel jobs, things like that. Then got a bigger opportunity on a 16 unit or 18 unit, I believe it was, full exterior renovation. Hardy siding, windows, doors, bit off way more than we could chew. So me, young and hungry, I'm like, we could do it. We'll subcontract some of this out. Like this is our first real big job. And the partner was kind of like, man, this is way too big. And he was right. But he said, man, this is way too big. I don't know how I feel about this. So we kind of had a little spat there and he didn't really want to ever grow it into a big company. He just wanted to like make ends meet. He just wanted a paycheck. He didn't want to do the truck driving anymore. He wanted to be home with his family. Very simple guy, simple life. So we took on the job and he quit working with me. He was like, okay, well, I think it's too big. We're not going to do it. So hired a buddy of mine who's still with me to this day. So that's crazy. 5 years later now. So hired a buddy and then a couple other friends like to sub out part-time to help tackle this job. We ended up knocking the job out. I think it was about a $60,000 job. I think I lost probably $5,000 by the end of it. So almost all the money I had at that time. But it taught us so much. And then we had our showpiece. So we had something we were able to start presenting to investors, presenting to realtors. And it was something on a main street, small multifamily that you would drive by and be able to tell people, hey, I did that. And that's one of the main reasons I love construction also, because you could kind of drive by, you did that. It's a good sense of feeling inside too. So we knocked that project out. And then fortunately for me, we got hit by a Category 5 hurricane. Not very fortunate for the rest of Louisiana and East Texas, but we got hit with a Category 5 hurricane and then that was all she wrote. At that point, we scaled up to 12 full-time employees, took my mom on board as like an operations manager and office manager. My younger brother joined the team, who are both still on the team to this day. And we just started crushing it. I mean, it was long 16-hour plus days. A bunch of us were living together because our houses were destroyed. And we just grinded for years, rebuilt part of Southwest Louisiana and Lake Charles, and just really found a passion in helping people like navigate insurance claims, rebuilding the city kind of. And that all kind of led to investing eventually. So that's kind of summing it up from how the whole construction company started, like a little 3-year timeline.
Amazing. Sorry, that all happened in 3 years?
Yeah, maybe a little less than that. So it happened quick. And I was like you, I could only imagine how you are with all the things you juggle, working some pretty long days.
Yeah.
To say
no
the
doubt. That's incredible,
but definitely enjoyed it.
I know I've talked to you quite a few times. I know a lot of your story, but I love about this interview that I'm going to get to ask you all these questions that I haven't got to ask before. But let's start. I'm going to rewind to the beginning of what you were telling me. So how did you come in and know what to improve on the property management with the older gentleman you mentioned who had the, kind of tough systems and not the best screening processes? Like, how did you come in and know what to do?
Yeah. So I tell people this a lot. I had on the blue collar side. So on the maintenance side, I was going to school for business management, but had a PhD in YouTube. So I was a guy that just figured it out when it would come, and grew up blue collar. I would have been a 3rd generation plumber. And then on the other side of my family, military background, but we had carpenters, electricians. So grew up being hands-on, able to build stuff, and was raised with a background of like figuring stuff out for problem solving. On the property management side, I had a PhD in bigger pockets. So got really big into bigger pockets at the time and kind of followed in the footsteps of a couple other people that I knew that didn't go to college, friends of mine that went straight into being real estate agents and real estate professionals, and kind of learned that way, books, education, just anything I could get my hands on outside of school and outside of work, just to fully submerge myself and educate myself. And just kind of, I mean, it couldn't get much worse than it was, is what we would always say. So it was a lot of trial by fire for sure.
How cool though that, right from the get-go, you saw, like you said, a bunch of stuff that you wouldn't want to do with your own properties. And then you also got to help improve, you're getting paid. I know you said it was between $8 and $12 an hour, but still you're getting paid to learn. And that isn't always true in internships of any type, whether it's a blue collar job or whether it's even, there's unpaid internships at Fortune 500 companies. So the fact that you got to get paid, learn on the job, do the hands-on part, like you said, which already kind of ran in your blood. And then the business management side, the property management side, that sets you up really well for what we said during your intro, which is now you have a big portfolio of properties across multiple types of asset classes. And I'm sure starting with those fundamentals was really helpful. And I think you also, are kind of tapping into something here where you have an entrepreneurial gene in you. It seems like clearly, right? Like you're always exploring, you're trying to, instead of just, like you said, going straight into trades, you wanted to run a business. You were studying business management. You were learning through bigger pockets and all that. Like, how can I treat this like a business? Did you always have that inclination, like when you were growing up, or like where do you think that came from?
That just sparked something that's really funny. Before we moved down here last week, we went and visited a lot of friends and family and stuff like that. And I went to my grandmother's house, who lives a little further away from where we did. And we were sitting talking around family, and she told a story that kind of reminds me of the entrepreneurial journey and kind of back where it started. They own a farm, and I would go like stay out there on the farm with them. They had cattle, horses, everything like that. And I loved staying out there as a kid. Well, one day the grandpa was a carpenter after military and all that. We go out and he's building a little fence and he's setting posts. And I'm a young kid and I'm like, I could set these posts. And he was like, all right, give me a price and you'll set these posts, or I'll pay you whatever. And I said, okay, well, $100, just figuratively. I was probably 10 years old, so many moons ago. I told him I'd do it for $100 or whatever. And I sit there and dig those posts all day long for $100. But instead I went down the road to a relative of ours that lived nearby who I knew had a tractor with an auger that like digs post holes. So I went to him and I said, hey, Uncle Bill, I need you to do me a favor. Let me borrow that tractor. Will you come down here and dig these posts for me? He said, you're not driving my tractor, but yeah, let me come help you out. He's an old guy too. So retired, no work, just use that to bush hog the fields and have fun. So he come down and he said, well, what are you going to pay me? And I figure up like how much I'm getting paid. And I said, I'll give you $5 a hole. And he was like, all right, I'll do it. So he digs all the posts and I end up making $20-$30 at such a young age, which feels like thousands now. And he dug all the posts. Then of course he says, no, you don't have to pay me. And then my grandparents that I just visited with were reminding me of that story. And I was like, man, I kind of remember that. And they were like, that's kind of where it all started, kind of, I think. And then a lot of my grandpa also owned a flea market, to where I was used to growing up bartering and trading like after he retired. So I'd hang around his flea market a lot and watch him like sell things. He would basically go to garage sales and flip stuff. So one of those typical stories of liking to hang around the old people a lot and kind of learning the old conservative ways of negotiating and doing things and buying and selling and bartering work like as a labor and blue collar, and just learned all those principles at a really young age. And then they all went full circle. I thought I was going to be some doctor or nurse as the course I was initially on. So a complete different path than what I ever expected.
Well, 30% margin on your first business, taking $100 and someone else to do it for 70. That's not bad. I'm sure a lot of people would kill for a 30% margin in just about any business.
And 100% once he didn't make me pay for it. So I was really excited. That went a long way back then. That probably bought me a lot of baseball cards.
Yeah. So I can't just breeze past the comment you just made that you thought you were going to be a doctor or a nurse. Where did that come from? And then what happened?
My mom actually worked in the healthcare industry, which we kind of talked about the other night with you getting deep into residential assisted living, which she's super passionate about. And she worked her way up to be a corporate business manager. They own 7 facilities before I pulled her into coming and working with me. A much less stressful, which is hard to believe, working for your son, who's very high ramped up at the time with construction work, that wouldn't be a stressful environment. Property management, which is uber stressful itself, but pulled her out of the residential assisted living and nursing home space. But that's where that it came from. Growing up, I kind of did some little maintenance work up there and would just hang around the facility as a kid a lot that she worked at primarily, and like have conversations with residents and just loved helping them out, doing like activities with them, things like that to just make them happy. A lot of them didn't have family. You know how those places are. Usually you're putting your family member in those and you're living further away. So you're not seeing them as much. And every scenario is unique, but kind of grew fond of a lot of the different residents at the home and built relationships with them. I was like, man, I kind of want to do this. And I would see the nurses and LPNs and CNAs and what all they did. And I was like, I kind of want to climb that ladder and help people and get as far as I can into that field. But that all shifted pretty quick when college started, partied a little too much, and was like, okay, being a nurse is a little more than I'm cut out for in terms of the clinicals and responsibilities there and stuff like that.
What a wild fork in the road though, right? Like, obviously look at what you did end up doing and imagine how different those two paths are.
I think about it all the time, and where, like, especially if I would have took it all the way and went into like some form of practice, probably would still be in school. I mean, I'm 28 years old currently. So, I mean, it would be close to just getting out of a practice and into a career instead of where we are today. So it is a big difference.
I was contemplating joining the military when I was in high school. And I always think about what a crazy different path and different life I'd be living right now if that had happened. So there are those fork in the road moments that it's interesting to reflect back on. But I'm sure another one of those, like you said, was the hurricane. I'm trying to remember, what year was that?
I believe that was 2020, 2021, Hurricane Laura. That was a Category 5 that hit us, direct hit to Lake Charles, where I'm from. Born and raised at Fort Johnson, Fort Polk, which is about an hour away, military family. So moved down to the big city of Lake Charles, population about 50,000, to go to college and stuff. And that's where we got directly smashed. We're about 20 miles off the Gulf of Mexico / America, whatever you want to call it now.
Yeah.
Off the coast and got absolutely destroyed. And the second we did, literally called up the guys, make sure everyone's good, took care of like friends and families, homes first, like getting a couple places livable. And then I remember, I think at one point there was 7 or 8 of us living in one house together. So my house got hit pretty hard, moved to my brother's house, and we just built a little hub in his house of as many guys as we could, stockpiled on materials, and kind of went and took care of people first before we started focusing on like rebuilding. So tarping roofs, putting out sandbags for the water, just different things like that to prevent any further damage. Then started to formulate a plan of like, okay, this is real. Let's gear up.
How old did you say you are right now?
I'm 28, okay. Just turned 28 last month.
So you were 23, 24 in this timeline, and you took on all that responsibility. And, you know, I've been living in cities during crisis times, different types of crisis, not necessarily Category 5 hurricane. And it's always interesting to see how the community rallies and supports each other in ways that are really beautiful. I mean, it sucks that it takes crisis to create that type of environment, but how cool is it that you were part of the solution of rebuilding the city? I remember watching that hurricane on TV.
Yeah.
I don't know why I can't help myself sometimes when I see those giant hurricanes forming. I just can't help but watch it. And I saw it was like Lake Charles, boom. And
yeah, it was really neat. It was really neat and helped foster a lot of relationships like at your local building supply stores. You start to know all the other contractors. You're kind of divvying up work between you all because just couldn't take it all ourselves. So everyone was kind of winning, but more than that, everyone was kind of helping, like you said, coming together. And like, we didn't even look at it as like, how much money can we make, or never even slowed down enough to realize that until it was all said and done and the smoke had cleared. And we were all just focused on getting people back in their houses as quick as we could, and getting back in our own houses and stuff.
Yeah. And you were able to think with that mentality of how can we get people back to safety, get them back to habitable environments, safe environments to live in. And all the while, like you said, I think you scaled your company to 12 people.
Yeah.
So,
and it was all free. It was all at first, the first initial weeks, like I had said, you have FEMA coming into town. They're giving out tarps. They're giving out like cases of water supplies. And we're going and tarping roofs just as quick as we could get tarps. We weren't even thinking like profit first. We were literally going and knocking those type of things out first. And then we started to, okay, let's form a plan. Let's go start capturing like all the people we had already worked for and did well by would calling us up, where we just had a roster, a list of, okay, Here's who we're helping first, like family and friends. And then here's our clients we've previously worked with who aren't having to wait for insurance that we could go jump on immediately.
Yeah.
So it was pretty cool. And then the bad part of it was, though, there was a lot of like people from out of state come in, storm chasers that are just there for a buck. And we would go behind a lot of those guys and like, well, yeah, they come and did the demo, but now our house is completely demoed and all our stuff's gone. And they ran off with that big demo or mitigation check or whatever that case may be. And then you're dealing with a battered homeowner also who just got railed. And that was the really shitty part of it, outside of going and telling people like your house is just a total loss. Like, I don't know what else to tell you. My apologies, but it's done for. And that built a muscle itself that was pretty tough, seeing some of that.
Yeah. So between the experience you got with the property management right at the beginning, and then going through that type of crisis, learning how to not only, this isn't just like going in and remodeling a kitchen. You're talking about rebuilding.
We're talking
structures.
We're talking trees falling through the middle of houses. And it's funny, I went and looked at a house for a friend a couple months ago as a foreclosure. And he's like, hey man, can you come take a look at this with the realtor and I? And I said, sure. He used to work with me. And I was like, yeah, let me come take a look at it. And the house is all moldy. Couple walls are gutted. And I just walk around with my camera. I take a couple minute videos how I do things. And I go back and analyze and like work up numbers. And I walk it probably 5 minutes. And I walk out and the agent didn't want to come inside because of mold and stuff. So me and him had walked in. I walk out and the agent's just standing there looking. I was like, oh, it's not that bad. And he was like, not that bad. And I said, were you here during the hurricane? And he had moved from somewhere up north, the agent did. And he was like, no. I said, he was like, what's your version of that? I was like, my version of that is a 40-foot pine tree laid through the middle of this. And us chopping that up and removing it and then literally rebuilding this from the ground up. I was like, that's my version of that. Or a couple feet of standing water, like stuff like that. Or the roof literally ripped off laying 30 foot from the house. That's our version of that.
Most people think I'm full of crap when I say that I can operate and grow my portfolio in an average of 20 minutes per day. So instead of asking you to take my word for it, I sat down with my business partner, Nathan, and we ran through our entire 20-minute investor strategy in a free workshop. We go through all the different workflows, software, and tools we use to stay in control of our portfolios so we can focus on what matters most to us. You can watch the entire workshop and download our workflows for free at 20minuteinvestor.com. Again, that's 20minuteinvestor.com. Now back to the show. Yeah. So this is all really good context to show just like you were forced to grow up really quickly. You put in a lot of work. You were around people that gave you the opportunity to learn from both mistakes and good best practices. And so all of that sets you up, and then you all of a sudden had a pretty well-established business. And I'm sure you had a good reputation having gone through all that. So where does your investor journey start with the 30 single family homes? Like,
yeah,
where'd you start rolling the snowball down the hill?
So that started when the smoke started to clear from all the storm work, and we had that good reputation, like you said, but everyone's house is remodeled then and new. So the work wasn't in renovations, and the market was still really good for like flipping because a lot of people were displaced. A lot of apartments and rentals were high in demand because people were displaced as well. And instead of jumping right into investing ourselves, we started to work with flippers in the area. So we had a few friends and people from our local meetup that would flip. So we became their contractor. And I like working with investors because we just went through the storm work where you have no clue when or if insurance is ever going to pay you. A lot of these insurance companies went belly up and we never got paid. Like we had receivables in excess of 50 grand. And we had payroll over 10, 20 grand a week sometimes. So it was tough during that time floating money when you're not sure when you're going to getting paid. And all of that had left a bad taste in our mouth from the storm to where we're like, okay, investors, this is a lot easier. We're dealing with bank loans and draws and things like that, where this is guaranteed income. Investors are not as picky typically because we're really experienced. So we're kind of bouncing ideas off of each other versus a homeowner, paint this wall pink, this wall purple. Let's go to the store together and pick out the backsplash, stuff like that, where it's very cookie cutter. Let's rock and roll. Here's my paint colors for the project. You have full control. Knock it out as quick as you can because that's how I get paid. So we enjoyed that. We did probably 20 or so projects like flips. And then one day a light bulb just went off and was like, holy shit, the smoke kind of cleared. Like I said, all the checks started to clear too from all the storm work. And we actually slowed down for a minute and looked at it like we could do this. And I think it was one of my guys who even had told us that. He was like, well, why don't you do this? I was like, man, I'm so busy and like in the weeds of things. And that's how I've always been in business until the last year or two. So in the weeds of things that sometimes you have to zoom out and look at it from a different perspective and start working on the business instead of in the business. And then comes like a vision and a plan to invest, and started having conversations with those investors. Like, how are you guys financing these deals? Like, what does that look like? And we had a stockpile of cash. So I didn't know anything about hard money lenders, construction loans, things like that. I just knew how to build a house. So that's what we did. Started to go, and there was still a good bit of storm work. So we would go look at a house, and we were mixing in our personal projects, investor projects. But we would go look at a house, and it would be a situation where I would tell the people, hey, this is going to be about 50 grand, for example. No, like insurance only paid us 30 and we don't have 20. And I was like, well, I could buy it. And that's where that notion had come from. And that thought of like, holy shit, there's a lot of these where me purchasing the house might help these people out. They could still collect their insurance funds and then move on from it and get a fresh start elsewhere, because otherwise there was no plan B for them. They didn't have 20 grand to cover it. They didn't have access to credit or a lot of these loan programs and FEMA and stuff like that, like rental assistance, government assistance, had been filled out to where it's like, get in line and we'll do another round soon. And until then, you're just shit out of luck. So we were providing, I like to think of it that way, at least, we were also providing an alternative to that for them to just sell their home. So that first year post completing most of the hurricane work, we started to shift into the investor pool, flipping with investors. And then that first year, I think we bought 5 single family, all cash. So these were little cheap $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 houses. I think the cheapest we had bought was probably 25-ish, and the most expensive of the first 5 was maybe 50, 60. These are your typical 2-bed, 1-bath, 3-bed, 1-bath, piers, house on piers, 1,000 square foot or less. Rent's going to be 800 to $1,000, like typical sweet little cash flow, but not going to appreciate style of deals. But that was kind of our bread and butter. Smaller houses, your renovation costs per foot aren't going to be near as high, and we could jump in there and knock them out quick, and we could get them rented really quick too because the demand was so high. So that first year I did 5 of those, and we were still mixing in all of the labor and work we were doing with other investors and still a little bit of storm work, keeping our crews busy, and was just funneling cash into these. Boom, purchase cash, rehab cash. I'm getting paid from Aaron, and I'm paying Tom over here for the work he just done on my stuff. So just kind of commingling, it was organized, but commingling everything, getting paid, paying out. And then the smoke cleared again to where the end of the year came, and we had the 5 paid off houses, all 5 fully renovated. And I was like, holy shit, I'm almost out of cash. I was like, I still have like 15, 20 grand a week in payroll, like I said earlier, and I only have 30 grand in the bank. What am I doing? So that's when I got introduced to like masterminds and stuff. Before Action Academy had started, I was in a group of younger GoBundance guys called Next Gen, and might have to cut that out because we weren't supposed to be affiliated with GoBundance necessarily, but I don't think they care. But that's where me and Brian Lubin had met, who's in charge of the mastermind you and me had met in Action Academy. And we were in a mastermind, and I come to a trip over here in Austin. It was like 25, 30 guys. And I get around these guys and I'm like, damn, they're doing bigger deals, whether it's wholesaling $1 million, buying small businesses, stuff like that, where they were still at like level 1 of like higher level investing, I guess you would say. But they were doing bigger deals, and I didn't have experience in, like, I still was buying deals cash, not using hard money, construction loans, anything like that. And I explained myself to them. So I come in, I drove over. A lot of these guys flew over. I drove. It's about a 4-hour drive. And I walk in late, and they had already started. They had a guy up there presenting that they had flew in that was like a coach, and he was in charge of the whole weekend. So it's pretty cool. And I walk in and they're like, introduce yourself. They put me on the spot. I was like, I'm a general contractor. I've just got into investing. I've got 5 single family homes. And that was it. I was like, that's me. And I thought I was hot shit. Boy, was I wrong, but I was in the right room. So like 30 minutes later, we do a little breakout, and you just partner up with one guy. And I was like, so yeah, there's what I do. And I thought I was like Mr. Cool. I was like, I got it going on, doing really well for myself these last few years. And he was like, yeah, I net over $1 million last year in wholesaling in Kansas City, Missouri, selling to BlackRock or something. I was like, holy shit. I was like, I'm in the right room. And he's one of the upper guys in that 30, but still, I was like, okay, I'm in the right spot. So all weekend, I was just consumed with telling everyone what I had going on, soaking up and just pages of notes. It was my first like revelation to the whole like business and coaching and masterminds. And the speaker just had wowed me. I'm sitting there just pages full, and everybody else is just sitting chilling like this is their normal. And they're used to these personal development trips and stuff like that. But I'd got a lot of good advice there and come back to Lake Charles on an all-time high. And the best advice I got was, man, if you want to, like, what do you want to do next? Like, clearly you need access to your cash. You need to cash out refi. And I was like, okay, what is that? Like, I've heard of it a little, but I'm so, like I'm telling you, man, I was so in the weeds of just working every day, just grinding long hours, rebuilding the city, starting to build our own portfolio, that I was just dumb to anything but cash. So they were like, you need to cash out refi. I was like, okay. So I go start looking into it, Bigger Pockets episodes with like David Green. He's huge on BRRRRs, and something I'm huge on now, and have almost done every deal by that method. But I get back to town and I'm like asking buddies at our local meetup and these guys we do these flips for. I'm like, who's your banker? Stuff like that. So I start dating bankers. I go to lunch with a couple guys and see who I could like get a vibe with. Caught a vibe with one banker who I know he's going to listen to this. He's my right-hand man still to this day. Caught a vibe with him and he's like, man, you need to come in and let's get these properties appraised and let's see what you're looking at here. And mind you, I had a 2001 Tacoma with like 200,000 miles on it. I'm super cheap, great credit, no debt, no anything like that. Didn't even have a primary residence at the time. So had the 5 rentals before I even bought a home myself, like traditionally. So go to him and I'm like, here's what I'm looking like credit wise, income wise. The last few years had looked great from all the storm work. And he's like, man, you're a bullet. We'll get you approved. We'll get you 80% LTV or wherever you want to be. Let's get these things appraised. And I'm like nodding my head. Yes. What's LTV? I have no clue. And I'm just going with it. I'm like, yeah. Kind of fake it until you make it. And I'm listening. I'm like going back on my phone every couple of seconds. Like, okay, what does that mean? And so we get all the appraisals done and all of that. And ironically enough, the next mastermind with that same group of Austin guys rolls around a couple months later and we go all meet again. And when I showed up, I told them, I was like, here's what happened last week to me that was life changing. And I showed them the picture of it. It was a check. The property's appraised for $565. We refied for $380. I had a $373,000 check. And I was like, here's where the last few years of my life have been. And that just was the mindset shift that like just shot me off like a rocket. I was like, holy shit, now I have $400,000 at like 24 years old. What do I do now? And how do I scale this? And how do I retain it and make sure that I'm not buying everything cash again? I'm being strategic and I'm making this money work for me.
So I have a question. You were talking about at the beginning, you're working for $8 an hour. You're talking about how making that $20, $30 margin on the tractor and drilling holes, like that felt like a lot of money to you at the time. So the relativity of money, right? You go from thinking 20, 30 bucks, understandably, right? When you're young, you're growing up and you're doing, like the entry level type roles, that does feel like a lot. But then you go from that in a very short amount of time to getting a $370,000 check. I think most people, especially in their 20s, would like lose control. And they would not have discipline and they would not be able to, maybe they might make a few good decisions, but, for the most part, it's pretty hard to hold on to money. They always say, right, like making money is a different skill than keeping money. So how did that like transformation and that relativity, you started adding zeros to the type of money you were getting. How did you deal with that? And were there any kind of mistakes or learning moments as you evolved to a different level?
So I would be lying to you if I said there wasn't a little bit of ego play. So as a former Las Vegas guy, you could get this. We went on some trips, we partied, we did the whole nine, took the team to Denver, Colorado for a ski trip. Like we did some fun stuff, but it was all like deserving. I didn't really splurge on anything except for I'd be lying to you if I didn't say I did buy a Corvette 2 now and got over that really quick. So it's weird. It's a blessing and a curse. I've always been a guy that's like a delayed gratification and always like striving for more and stuff like that, to where nothing like that really ever seemed too big for me. Like I'm always ready for that next level. And that is a blessing and a curse because it's hard to stay present a lot of times, like in the moment, and enjoy those fruits of the labor. And it's tough being a visionary and a boss to people too, who think that you should splurge and they think that you should treat them and things like that. So it's all about finding that balance of like, okay, how do I reward my team? How do we scale smart though and not blow through this? And for me, it was easy just because I'd always had those principles instilled of being hyper conservative and always thinking like bigger picture, delayed gratification, what's next, things like that. But like I said, could definitely be a blessing and a curse because it's hard to stay present and really enjoy instead of just immediately that next thought clicks of, okay, what's next? How can I turn this 300 into 3 million? Like stuff like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I have one more question about the story you were telling earlier. So you go into the Go Abundance room or the mastermind group, you start surrounding yourselves with people that are doing things on, what you would consider to be a different level at that time. And you start to have this comparison trap, right? Where you're saying, I think, in my opinion, you should be proud of the fact that you had 5 houses and, that you paid off, you bought in cash, you had done a ton of work, you'd built a business, you had a lot to be proud of. But all of a sudden in that room, you felt like you were, maybe on a different level than everyone around you. I think there's it's almost a problem when you start to think that what you have done is not enough just because you're around other people who have done what you consider to be more. So
Yep.
I believe you have a really good attitude and mindset in general about all this stuff, but I just want to for people who are listening to this who maybe haven't joined a mastermind or been in those type of rooms, I think there's a perception that it's all ego. It's all ego. So I just want to get your thoughts on that and how you dealt with the comparison part in particular.
I mean, honestly, it's tough. And you know this, being in the mastermind together in Action Academy, we have our pods, and that's our accountability groups. My favorite part of every week is getting to hang out and talk with my guys, like my 5 people. And you almost feel like you just said, like comparison is the thief of joy or happiness or whatever you want to say the quote there. But it's true because you get into this higher level in this higher room where you want to bring something to the table. And it's not just every trip now. Like we see each other twice a year internationally, and that's awesome. So you want to bring that to the table. Like, yeah, I've done this, this, and that, but now it's every week. So you start to break it down even more where it's like a weekly occurrence of like, okay, who's coming to the group with a new deal? And you feel like you've got to live up to this standard. So that is really tough, but I've always enjoyed that. Like I've always been in athletic and sports and a competitor. So I've always got a kick out of that. And I really don't have the answer to how to combat it, but just stay in your own lane, figure out what you want. Everyone's desires are different. And for me, I want a lot. I want to go big. I don't have anything really tying me down. I didn't have kids at a young age. I know is a big thing. I didn't get married or have a divorce where I had a big hardship in my life or anything crazy like that. So I'm kind of full steam ahead and love that next level. But at the same time, one thing I heard someone say recently, every level there is a new devil. And that's super true to where things just get harder, mentally, things get tougher, financially, earnest money deposits on huge deals that you might not get, you might lose. Been there, done that. So it's just finding figuring out your gauge, risk or whatever that looks like, risk, lifestyle, time with your family, for example, and how far can you push that needle before you need to tone it back. So instead of trying to compare yourself, because like we said, it's tough not to, and tough not to come in on a higher level. Just find that inner peace. And then that needs to be where your goal is set and where your bar set. And once you hit that, you're good. All the other stuff is just extra. All the other stuff, let people have that. Let them have their own happiness. Because I know a lot of those guys that are not happy. So that is a fact.
No, that's so cool, man. And that's kind of what I was hoping you would say, because sometimes I feel like people think that, oh, I don't deserve to be in this room, or if I don't have the flashy car, if I don't have the private plane, it's too far out of reach. It's unrelatable. But, you don't have to want the same things that other people want, but there's always something you can learn from somebody else, whether they have, $20 million or whether they, living in the house that they grew up in, that they inherited from their parents, and they're doing something else. There's something you can learn from every single person that you encounter. And putting yourself in rooms like that, though, it gives you a better chance to kind of up level your skills and often your mindset too. So you were talking about bigger deals. So we talked about the 30 single family. I'm sure that 5, you figured out how to continue to snowball that. And you learned about debt. You learned about cash out refinance. You learned about BRRRRs. So now let's talk about, you got a multifamily property and you got a storage. So let's unpack those.
Yeah, so that all kind of come to fruition through the masterminds and through like higher level thinking and seeing people in other asset classes doing bigger deals. Because where we're at, and one of the reasons I've now moved to Austin is like getting uncomfortable again. Like I love being uncomfortable. I love being the new guy. I love starting over and starting fresh with like no ego involved, no reputation, and just go for it all over again. So I'm really excited about being here. But it started in that first trip where me and you met in Costa Rica. I come in a few days early, an Action Academy trip. I come in a few days early and there was a couple guys there that I had no clue. I was like fresh on the scene, not very active in the Facebook group and all that. And Ben Call was one of the guys who's a coach for you and I both, right? Aren't you with him? Yeah, him and his wife, Michaela, are great. Love them. And they encouraged me to come on the show and stuff too. They were like, man, you need to go on air and show, things like that. So it's cool how it all goes full cycle. But met Ben on that trip and he never talked about money. He never talked about like what all he had done those first couple days before everyone got there. We just had a great ass time. We're in the Costa Rican jungle. We went and scuba dived together with freaking sharks, like totally out of my comfort zone, like stuff I'd never done. And money or anything, it never came up once. And then come to find out he's one of the bigger guys in the group, as you know, and he's well-versed in triple net, multifamily storage. And he had just on that trip kind of put a bug in my ear about storage primarily and first and foremost, but about storage. And I just loved everything he said about it, just the passiveness of it compared to rental properties and all the shit that I deal with as someone who self-manages all of our own properties and things like that. And just kind of fell in love with that asset class. And then multifamily, that was just kind of a given. Like you usually go single to multi, whether it's small multi, large multi, even in whatever your market you're in, that's kind of your stepping stone. But storage was just something so outside of anything I'd ever known or done. So I give him credit for that. And just the room in general, getting a different vibe of like, okay, there's more than one way to skin a cat is what I call it. So there's a lot of different ways to get to that end goal of financial freedom. In single families where I'm at currently, and it's going to take a hell of a lot of those to get to where I want to be. So how can I skip the line is what I tell people. And people, what are masterminds about? I was like, dude, you get in here, you pay to be in these rooms, you get all these knowledge from people that are super ahead of you. And I call it skipping the lunch line. Like as a kid, the cool kid would get to skip the lunch line. So that's what I call it. Like you have friends that are in the front of the line that you know, and you get to come in and skip a lot of those steps. You get direct access to different resources like lenders, or in our case, different models for like underwriting, different methods, different niches, stuff like that. And I was like, okay, we're skipping the lunch line again, just in adult form. So got into the rooms and started to skip the line and was like, okay. And then I always tell people this, I just liked the way it tasted. Like the grass was greener on the other side. And I just liked the way that first storage deal tasted, and everything he had said and others had said rang true of like, okay, it's a lot less overhead. You build these systems and kind of automate things, and then you could do that at scale. And it was something I wasn't very familiar with, and something that you're not physically putting your hands on, like the 30 single family every single week with the repairs and maintenance. It was something that was a lot different and new to me, and loved the way that it tasted, essentially.
Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah, that concept of kind of speeding things up. I know Brian Lubin, he calls it folding time, right? If you had an idea that you wanted to get somewhere in 3 years, it's like asking yourself the question, well, what would it look like if I wanted to get there in 6 months or 1 year? And then you have to, kind of adapt your strategy towards that. And I've actually that's something that my wife and I have been through recently, because when we had 3 kids in 3 years, go figure, our life changed quite a bit. Our financial world, our amount of income that we brought in and the expenses like totally flipped, right? So the math of our lives and the strategies that we need to do between our W-2, our investing, that all changed dramatically. So we had a different version of folding time where it was like, it was no longer an option to just start, keep stacking single family rentals. And we were saving up for our down payments. So like we couldn't save up like that anymore. And then the cash flow generated from those wasn't big enough to snowball into the type of income that we need to support our long-term goals. So that's how we ended up shifting strategies towards, in our case, it's residential assisted living, which we're going to start a business and then also, develop commercial real estate. And it's interesting when you make those big leaps, because it is a different set of skills, and it's also a totally different mindset. You mentioned Ben Call, he's one of our mentors. And, the way he navigates these kind of what to me feel like these big crisis moments, like, oh, the lending, the terms changed, or, this expense ballooned by $150,000. If you're not accustomed to those type of swings and those type of, speed bumps, it's enough to knock you out. And so I think
One
he's
thing I liked a
adapted.
lot that I heard is from someone recently was once you get to this level or the next level or whatever level you want to deem it, and like Bennett said there, everything becomes a line item. And I was like, what do you mean? And he was like, you just have to just bypass all the negativity because it's going to balance back out. And at the end of the day, it's only a line item. And I was like, man, I like that. Everything's just a line item. It's true.
Yeah, that's really good. And I think, you only build the resilience to get through those things by surrounding yourself with people who have already done that type of thing and can hold their composure together. You can work with them directly as mentors, or you can just be near them and through osmosis. We're in Action Academy. There's 400 people in there, and a good chunk of them are already doing deals at or above the kind of level that we are trying to do. And so just by osmosis and by watching people, and people aren't afraid to be vulnerable there. People are sharing, we have what we call Wednesday wins, where every Wednesday people go and post, something cool that they did. And it's not like you have to close on a $5 million property in order to post a Wednesday win. You post anything. Hey, I went for a walk with my kids yesterday and it was beautiful. Or you started this episode by saying I watched the Texas sunset for one of the first times in my apartment. It's like, that's a freaking Wednesday win. But what we also see are people sharing like the lessons they learned through the tumultuous and tough times and how they dealt with that. And I think that's when you really feel the most out of the group. You mentioned pods too. So these accountability groups, but it's so much more than accountability, right? And people can support and celebrate milestones as they go, but it's when you feel like you lost something or you hit a really, really hard moment of resistance or you're losing motivation, like that's when these things really get called into play. And I think that's where on the investor journey, whether you're doing single family or whether you're doing bigger deals, like you're going to hit those speed bumps. So it's like, how can you build the defense system and the support system to get through those? And I love what you said about the line item. That's a really good way to think about it, because if you just account for the fact that sometimes things are going to suck and you know that in the long run, you're going to get through it, you're going to solve the problems. Even if you suffer a financial loss, in the long run, you will win if you stay at the game and you keep solving problems and surrounding yourself with good people. I feel like that's how you outlast those who give up in moments like that. So you talk about what's next. Sorry, go ahead.
Just like stress and just like everything, it's a muscle you build. So the more reps, the more times you take the losses, the stronger you get to be able to adhere those losses and they don't affect you as much. And that's when they become normal. And then the benefit of the groups, like we keep saying, is like people on these higher levels, those higher levels also come with higher level losses too. And then you're quickly shook back and you're like, okay, that wasn't so bad. I could have flooded my 20 unit today or whatever. And all I did was had a tenant wreck one single family. So it's just a different perspective that you get on things and that you get on life by being in these groups.
Yeah. And I think a Category 5 hurricane slamming into and destroying your town probably put things in perspective when you have these problems that pop up, and they might not feel good, but you can always harken back to that memory and just think like, oh God, well, at least it wasn't that, right?
Yep, exactly.
Awesome. Well, we could probably go 2 full hours on this because I know you got a lot to unpack in your story. And I definitely want to have you on again soon. But I want to round it out by just kind of sharing, like you've traced a lot of your story, starting from that very, very early moment, like $8 an hour, solving problems, helping someone redo their SOPs, to now you're taking down storage facilities. You just moved to Austin, so you're clearly like trying to put yourself towards the center of some of these networks of people that you're, want to be around and you want to level up. So what is next for you? What are your goals over the next, 1 to 2 years?
So what we're focused on, I'll give it to you in a 3-year because that's really how we have it casted out right now. So in the next 3 years, we want to go from a $5 million to a $50 million portfolio. So 10X in where we're currently at. And what that's going to look like is only focusing on bigger deals. So one of the themes I set for the year was 7-figure deals only. We'll still buy a single family here or there to keep guys back home busy, things like that aren't distractions anymore because we have good project management. We have good subcontractors to where investing in single family or flipping a house is pretty passive now, where that used to consume a lot of time. So the focus is 7-figure deals We're under contract right now on 3 storage facilities. It's a portfolio of 3 units. We should be closing in the next 2 weeks. And it's ironically enough, a 1 million even deal. So that ties in with the theme there for the year and just staying focused. We wanted to close that in Q1 and then close 2 more $2 to $3 million purchases over the next 9 months of the year. So we're a month or 2 behind, but we'll catch up quick. I see how this game goes. It's definitely always a snowball. And when you revisit these goals really frequent, I'm big on goal setting and like revisiting your goals and realigning your KPIs and things like that. It just so happens to always happen. Like whatever you put in, you're going to get out. And here we are right on in line with where we wanted to be with the move to Austin, with this first big purchase of the year. And it's all because we stayed focused on that one thing and those few things. And that's where we're going. We're going to continue building our team. Our next hire will be an operations manager, property manager assistant to maintain all our single family. And then the operations manager will be solely for storage. And we're trying to get a good footprint of where we could take down at least 5 to 10 facilities this year and over the course of next year in a certain region. So this person will be able to go around to each and do some of those weekly operations and things like that and kind of have a hub. But the other thing I like about storage the most is like now to where we built the systems and we built that muscle, and I'm over here in Austin now and things are going very well. It's given me the confidence that we could buy these deals remote in pretty much anywhere. And through Action Academy, which we keep relating back to, guys in my storage pod, they're doing it. So the proof of concept's there. The confidence is there. We're all sharing and really abundant when it comes to these similar systems. We're using these similar softwares, all these similar aspects of that particular asset class is right there. And there's people doing it. So why not me at that point? So that's kind of where we're headed. And that'll be between storage and multifamily. And we'll probably eventually get into some triple net and development because of the construction background. That's one reason I love storage. And these 3 facilities we're about to close on all have expansion opportunity. And the thing I like the most about storage expansion and development from my contracting background is when we build a house, we're dealing with typically 30 to 40 subcontractors. From the dirt that gets laid in the yard to the cleaner that's cleaning the house. You're managing and dealing with 30 to 40 people versus 4 with storage. Your foundation, your electrical, your mechanical and HVAC, and your metal. And that's it. And then you're dealing with all of your site planning and engineering and things like that. But that's my cup of tea. So you're dealing with 4 versus 40, essentially. So a 10x difference in also something way more gratifying than just building one single house for me. It's something that fulfills me a lot more. So really excited about growing that storage portfolio over the next 3 years.
That's so cool, man. But I also want to call out that it's, it's the experience that you had in the early running and the lessons and the foundation that you built, everything you described in this interview that led you to the point you're at now where you can take that, 10x vision and go from 5 million. Was it 5 million to 50 million? Was that the number?
Yep. That's where we're at. Yep.
Amazing. Well, I'm excited to root you on. I had a lot of fun sitting down and getting inside your head for about an hour here. And I'm sure the audience did too. If people want to find you and stay in touch with you or reach out and ask any questions, where can they do that?
Not super active on social media, but you could hit me on Facebook at my name, which will be in the show notes. And then Instagram is my last name, Frusha, Frusha, Legend, Legend. And I'm like fairly active on both, but I'm quick to respond to messages. And something I always give you a lot of credit for in closing. And I talked to you about the meetup the other night. And I told someone this before. I told you, I was like, I want to be more like Aaron, where I'm really active in engaging with the community and like giving back, because this community in Action Academy has given so much to me. So I want to start to get to the point where even if it's just little wins, like we post each week, just giving feedback and then giving a lot of these principles that I could instill in some of the newer comers that want to get into development or storage or build a single family, multifamily portfolio, just being able to get more active and post in there. So that's something we are starting to do on both Facebook and Instagram. We're trying to put out daily content, like small financial tips. Like this week, I have a series of why I moved to Austin, and it's all about changing my environment, changing my perspective. And that's something that my coach and other people have challenged me to do, is start to post and like give a little more of this knowledge and kind of spread these seeds. So you could catch me on both of those, and would love to get on a call with anyone and do a round 2 with you also.
Love it. Yeah, you're welcome back on this show anytime, because there's plenty of different directions we could take it from here. But thank you again so much for coming on the show, and we'll talk to you soon.
Awesome, man. Thank you.
Thank you for making it to the end of today's episode. As you may know, podcasts are very difficult to grow organically. If you're getting value from today's episode, I'd deeply appreciate if you can take 30 seconds to leave my show a 5-star rating and review. This will go a long way to helping me reach more listeners just like you. Thank you so much in advance.